I want to start with a door. A specific door. The front door of a house in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that I had walked through thousands of times in the first 18 years of my life. A green door with a brass handle that had tarnished slightly on one side from the specific way my father always grabbed it when he came in from work. A door I knew in the way that you know the things that have been part of your daily life so long they have become invisible, the exact weight of it, the slight resistance at the bottom where the wood had swollen from years of Louisiana humidity, the specific sound it made when it closed all the way. I stood in front of that door on a Thursday afternoon in September. I had not touched it in 12 years. I was 30 years old. I was wearing civilian clothes, jeans and a plain shirt, because I had been told by someone who understood these things that walking into that situation in uniform would make it about the uniform rather than about the people. I had listened. My hands were in my pockets. I stood on the porch of the house where I had grown up and I tried to remember the last time I had touched that door. I remembered exactly. It was June 14th, 12 years earlier. I was 18 years old. I had just told my family that I had enlisted in the United States Army and my father had looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before and he had said, very quietly, "If you walk out of this house to go to that recruiter, do not come back." I had walked out. I had not come back. Until now. What happened when I knocked on that green door? What my mother said when she opened it and saw my face. And what my father said 4 hours later when he finally came downstairs, is the story I want to tell you today. But I cannot tell you any of it without telling you what the 12 years were. And I cannot tell you what the 12 years were without starting at the very beginning. If you are new here, please subscribe right now and drop your country and local time in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you all the way back. My name is Staff Sergeant Maya Tran, United States Army, retired. I am 30 years old. And the story of how I became who I am is inseparable from the story of who my family believed I should have been. I grew up in Baton Rouge as the middle child of 5 in a Vietnamese-American family that had built everything it had from nothing. My grandparents had come to Louisiana in 1979 as refugees. They had arrived with specific combinations of things, the ability to work extraordinarily hard, the specific resilience of people who have lost everything and understood that what remains after everything is lost is the will to rebuild, and the specific, burning determination to ensure that the generation that came after them would not have to start from nothing. They had built a restaurant. My grandparents, then my parents. A Vietnamese restaurant in Baton Rouge that had been in the family for 35 years by the time I enlisted, and that was, by the measure of the community it served, something real and good and worth being proud of. My parents had added to what my grandparents built. They had bought a house. They had sent 5 children to school with the specific, relentless emphasis on education that I have never seen matched in any other family I have been part of. They had built a life that was, in the accounting of the first-generation American family that they were, genuinely successful. And they had, in the building of that life, developed a specific and clearly articulated picture of what the next generation was supposed to do with what they had been given. The picture included college. It included professional careers. It included the specific markers of the kind of success that could be pointed to, degrees on walls, titles on business cards, the visible evidence of the investment paying off. The picture did not include the army. My father had come to this country as a refugee from a country where war had taken everything from his family. He had watched it take people. He had watched it take a homeland. He had rebuilt himself and his family in Louisiana specifically so that the next generation would not have to experience what war did to the people inside it. The army was war. The army was the thing he had rebuilt his life to escape. When I told him I had enlisted, he heard something different from what I had said. He heard his daughter choosing the thing he had spent 30 years trying to protect her from. He told me not to come back. I understood why even when it broke me. I was 18 years old when I walked away from that green door. I want to tell you what 18 felt like in the specific context of walking away from everything you have known towards something that most people in your life believe is a mistake. It felt like the most alone I had ever been. Not because I doubted the decision. I did not doubt the decision. I had been thinking about the Army since I was 14 and had read a book about the history of women in American military service and had understood, with the specific, immediate clarity of someone who has found the thing that fits, that this was the direction. But there is a specific quality to being alone in the right direction that is different from being alone in the wrong one. The right direction does not make the alone comfortable. It makes it bearable. And bearable is not the same as easy. I reported to Fort Jackson in South Carolina for basic training. I will not spend a great deal of time on basic training because basic training is not what this story is about. What I will tell you is that I arrived at Fort Jackson as a Vietnamese American girl from Baton Rouge whose family had told her not to come back, and I left as something I had not fully been before. Not a soldier, not yet. Not in the complete sense. But something that was becoming a soldier. Something that had discovered, in the specific, uncompromising environment of basic training, what it was made of. What I was made of was more than I had known. The years. I want to tell you the years specifically because the years are the body of this story and they deserve their full weight. I deployed to Afghanistan for the first time at 21. Not in a combat role, my military occupational specialty was in intelligence analysis. I was looking at information, processing it, turning it into something that commanders could use to make decisions. It was the specific, demanding, largely invisible work of making sense of a complex environment so that the people making the critical decisions had what they needed to make them well. I was good at it. I knew this from the feedback I received, which in military intelligence is specific and direct. The feedback loop between the analyst and the outcome is often clear enough that you can see, in the decisions that are made and the results that follow, whether what you contributed was useful. What I contributed was useful. I came home from the first deployment to Fort Meade, Maryland, where I had been reassigned. I was 22 years old. I had been in 2 mortar attacks and had continued doing my job during both of them and had, afterward, processed the experience in the specific way that young people in dangerous places process dangerous experiences, by compartmentalizing it and continuing. I wrote my mother a letter. I had been writing her letters since basic training. Not emails, letters. On paper. I had made a decision early that the paper letter was the right form for what I needed to say because paper letters require more of you than emails do, and what I needed to say to my mother required more of me than I could give in an email. She wrote back. Every letter. Without fail. She never told my father she was writing back. I did not know this for several years. The second deployment came at 24. Iraq this time. A different environment, a different set of challenges, a different quality of complexity. I had been promoted to specialist and then to sergeant between deployments, and I had, in the years at Fort Meade, developed a reputation in my unit for a specific kind of analytical work that required both precision and speed, the ability to process complex information quickly and correctly in time-sensitive situations. The second deployment tested that in ways the first had not. I will not describe specific operations because operational security is real and because the specifics are not what this story is about. What I will tell you is that there was a period of 48 hours during the second deployment in which what I did in my role as an intelligence analyst contributed directly to an outcome that I will carry for the rest of my life. Not because of what was prevented. Because of what it cost to be present for it. I came home from the second deployment different from how I had left. Not broken, I want to be precise about this. Not damaged in the dramatic way that people sometimes expect from returning soldiers. But changed. In the specific, irreversible way that certain experiences change people, not by taking something away but by adding something that cannot be removed. A weight. Not a bad weight. Just the weight of having been in a place where the stakes were real in a way that most people will spend their lives not experiencing. I carried it carefully. I still carry it. I wrote my mother a letter about it. She wrote back. My father still did not know. I was promoted to staff sergeant at 26. The promotion board was specific in its assessment, my record was strong, my evaluations were strong, My performance in both deployments had been noted by people at levels above my immediate supervisors, and the board recognized what it saw. I wrote my mother a letter about the promotion. She wrote back. She said she was proud. She said she prayed for me every day. She said she missed me in a way that she was not able to fully describe in a letter, but that she hoped I could feel across the distance. I could feel it. I wrote back and told her so. I also asked her about my father. She said, "He reads the letters, Maya." I sat with that for a long time. He was reading the letters. He was reading them and had been reading them and had never said anything to my mother about reading them and had never written to me. He was reading the letters. That was something. I did not know yet what to do with it. The incident that led to my retirement happened at 28. I am going to tell you about it carefully because it is important and because it deserves to be described honestly and because the honest description is the only one I am willing to give. On a specific operation during a third deployment, to a location I will not name, there was a situation. A situation in which my vehicle was disabled and the people I was with were in a position of significant danger and in which I made a series of decisions over approximately 90 minutes that my commanding officer later described, in a written evaluation that I have read many times, as demonstrating exceptional composure under the most demanding conditions he had witnessed in 20 years of service. I was injured. Not catastrophically, but significantly. An injury to my right shoulder and my hearing in the left ear that required surgery and rehabilitation and that would not, ultimately, permit me to continue in the active duty role I had been in. The medical board reviewed my case. They determined that I could not continue in an active duty capacity. I was honorably discharged. I was awarded the Bronze Star. I was 28 years old. I went to the VA hospital for the surgery. Then I went to a rehabilitation facility for 4 months. Then I sat in a rented room in Arlington, Virginia, and I thought about what came next. What came next was Baton Rouge. I want to tell you about the months between the discharge and the green door. They were not easy months. Not because I did not know what I wanted, I had known since the medical board what the next step was. But because the knowing and the doing are different things and the doing required a specific preparation that I had not anticipated. I needed to be ready. Not ready for the reunion. Ready for the possibility that the reunion was not available. That the 12 years of letters and the fact that my father had been reading them did not necessarily mean that the door was open. My mother and I had been corresponding for 12 years. But we had not spoken. Letters are a specific form of communication that is not the same as conversation. Letters can carry warmth and love and genuine exchange of information while also maintaining the distance that direct conversation does not permit. I had not spoken to my mother in 12 years. I had not spoken to my father at all. I called my mother. It was a Tuesday morning in August. She answered on the second ring. When she heard my voice, she made a sound that I do not have a word for. Not a word, not a cry exactly. A sound that a mother makes when she hears the voice of the child she has been corresponding with for 12 years but has not heard in 12 years. We did not speak for approximately 30 seconds. We were both just present on the phone. Then she said, "Maya." I said, "Mom." And then we talked for 3 hours. Not about everything, 3 hours is not enough for everything. But about the things that needed to be said before I came home. About my father. About whether the door was open. She said, "He has read every letter." "I know," I said. "He keeps them," she said. I was quiet. "He keeps them in a box in his study," she said. "He does not know I know about the box. But I know about it. The specific weight of that. My father. Who had told me not to come back. Who had not written a single word in 12 years. Who kept my letters in a box in his study. "Mom," I said. "Is the door open?" She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Come home, Maya. Come home and we will find out together." I drove from Arlington to Baton Rouge. 14 hours. straight through, stopping only for gas and coffee. I had learned in the army to cover distance without fuss, and I covered this distance the same way. I arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I parked in front of the house. I sat in the car for approximately 20 minutes. Not from fear, I want to be clear about this. Not paralysis. Something more considered than fear. The specific, deliberate taking of time to be ready for whatever was going to happen on the other side of that door. I got out of the car. I walked up the front path. I stood on the porch. I knocked. My mother opened the door. She had aged in 12 years. Of course she had, everyone ages in 12 years. But there was something about seeing it that 12 years of letters had not prepared me for. The specific, physical reality of my mother's face 12 years older than the face I had been carrying in my memory. She looked at me. She looked at me the way someone looks when they are confirming that what they are seeing is real. Then she said my name. Maya. And she held out her arms. I walked into them. She held me the way mothers hold their children when they have been afraid for a very long time and the fear has finally ended. Not gently. Completely. The way you hold something when letting go even slightly is not an option. I held her back. We stood in the doorway of that green-doored house and we held each other for a long time. Then she pulled back. She looked at my face. She put both hands on either side of it, the way she had when I was small, the specific, assessing look of a mother who is checking whether her child is okay. "Are you okay?" she said. "Yes," I said. "The shoulder?" "Healing." "The ear?" "Managed." She looked at my eyes. The specific search of someone who knows the difference between what a person says and what they mean. "Are you okay?" she said again. The real question this time. I held her gaze. "I am," I said. "I am more okay than I have ever been." She nodded. She believed me. She should have. It was true. My brothers and sisters came. Not all at once, my mother had called them when I had called her in August and they had been preparing in their own ways. My oldest brother Quan came first, with his wife and their 2 children. Then my sister Lynn. Then my youngest brother Min, who drove 4 hours from New Orleans and arrived slightly breathless and hugged me for a long time without saying anything. The kitchen filled with people. The kitchen that I had grown up in. The same yellow walls. The same table. The smell of my mother's cooking that had been constant in my life for the first 18 years and that I had not realized how specifically I missed until I was standing inside it again. I sat at the table. I was surrounded by my family. Not all of my family. My father had not come downstairs. I want to tell you about the 4 hours. 4 hours between my mother opening the door and my father coming downstairs. I do not know exactly what he was doing in those 4 hours. I have not asked him and he has not told me, and I have decided that what he was doing is his to keep. What I know is what my mother told me later. She said that when she called to tell him I was there he had said, "I know." She said, "He must have heard the car. Or heard us in the doorway. Or heard us in the kitchen," I said. "Or that," she said. He had known I was there for 4 hours. He had sat upstairs for 4 hours. I understand this. I do not say that with resentment or with the performance of understanding. I say it because I genuinely understand what 4 hours of deciding something that enormous looks like. I have spent time in situations where the decision in front of me was the most consequential decision available to me and where I needed every moment that was available before I could make it. My father needed 4 hours. I had waited 12 years. 4 hours was nothing. He appeared at the kitchen doorway at 7:30 in the evening. The kitchen had gotten quieter by then, not empty, but the initial rush of reunion had settled into the specific, comfortable noise of a family that has been together for several hours and has moved past the heightened register of the early reunion into something more ordinary. He stood in the doorway. He was 63 years old. He had always been a large man, not tall, but broad, with the specific physical quality of someone who has worked hard with their body for their entire adult life. He was smaller than I remembered. Not in fact, he had not shrunk. But the specific way that people who have been large in your imagination sometimes become more accurately sized when you see them again. He stood in the doorway. He looked at me. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my youngest brother Min beside me. I looked at my father. The kitchen had gone very quiet. Everyone in the room understood what was happening. He looked at me for a long time. At my face. At my shoulder, the way it sat slightly differently now, the specific quality of a healed injury that is not quite invisible. At my hands on the table. Then he walked across the kitchen. He pulled out the chair across from me. He sat down. He put his hands on the table. And he said, "Tell me." Just that. Tell me. I told him. Not everything. Not in one sitting. 12 years is not a conversation, it is a relationship, and relationships are not built in single conversations. But I told him the beginning of it. I told him about basic training. About Fort Meade. About the first deployment and what the work had been and what I had been good at and what it had felt like to be good at something that mattered in the specific, real way that intelligence analysis in a deployed environment matters. I told him about the second deployment. Not the 48 hours, not that night, not that conversation. But the broad shape of it. The complexity. The specific quality of what it had required. I told him about the promotion to staff sergeant. He listened. He did not speak for a long time. Then he said, "The Bronze Star." I looked at him. "Your mother did not tell me," he said. "I found it. Online. Your name. The citation." I was quiet. "I read the citation," he said. He looked at his hands. "I read what it said you did," he said. The kitchen was completely silent. "I have read it many times," he said. "Since I found it." "Many times." He looked up. His eyes were wet. Not crying. The specific, controlled quality of a man who does not cry easily and is managing something very large with everything he has. "You are not what I was afraid you would become," he said. I looked at him. "What were you afraid I would become?" I said. He was quiet for a long time. "A casualty," he said. "Of a war that was not yours to fight." The word landed between us. Casualty. The specific, loaded word of a man who had watched war take things from his family and who had spent 30 years trying to ensure it would not take anything else. "I am not a casualty," I said. "No," he said. "You are not." He looked at me. "You are a staff sergeant," he said. "With a Bronze Star." "Yes," I said. "And you are my daughter," he said. "Yes," I said. He put his hands flat on the table. "I told you not to come back," he said. "Yes," I said. "I was wrong," he said. The kitchen was silent. "I was wrong to say it and I was wrong to mean it and I have been wrong for 12 years every time I did not write back," he said. "I read every letter. I kept every letter. And I never wrote back and that was wrong." He looked at me. "I do not know how to ask you to forgive something that large," he said. I looked at my father. At the man who had told me not to come back. At the man who kept my letters in a box in his study. At the man who had read the Bronze Star citation many times. I said, "You already asked me the right way." He looked at me. "You said tell me," I said. That was the right way to ask. You sat down and you said tell me and you listened. That was what I needed. He was quiet. "That is enough," he said. "It is enough to start," I said. "And starting is everything." He nodded. Then he did something I had not seen my father do since I was very small. He reached across the table. He covered my hand with his. He held it. We sat at the kitchen table in the yellow-walled house in Baton Rouge with my family around us, and we held the beginning of something that had taken 12 years to arrive at. It was not everything. It was the start of everything. And the start was enough. I want to tell you about what happened over the following weeks. Because the Thursday at the kitchen table was the beginning, and the beginning is not the whole story. My father and I talked. Not once, every day. He would find me in the kitchen in the morning and he would ask me something specific and I would answer, and then I would ask him something and he would answer, and we were building what we had not built in the 18 years before I left because we had not known we needed to build it. We were learning each other. Not the child-parent version. The adult version. The version where two people who love each other also see each other clearly and are willing to be seen clearly in return. He told me about the refugees. About the boat. About what his father had seen in the war that had made my grandfather the specific, resilient man he was. About what carrying that had done to my father. About the specific, logical connection between watching war take everything from your family and spending your adult life trying to ensure it could never take anything again. I told him about the 48 hours. The second deployment. The operation I had not described to my mother in the letters because some things are not letter things. The 90 minutes. The decisions. What it had cost and what it had produced. He listened to every word. When I finished he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You were not afraid." I was afraid, I said. I was afraid every second. But you did not stop, he said. No, I said. Where does that come from, he said. I looked at my father. At the man who had rebuilt his family from nothing in Louisiana. At the man who had built a restaurant and a house and 5 educated children from the specific, resilient determination of someone who had been a refugee and had decided that what remained after everything was lost was the will to rebuild. From you, I said. It comes from you. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Your grandfather would have said the same." I know, I said. He would have been proud, he said. I know that too, I said. He nodded. The specific nod of a man who is receiving something he has been waiting to be able to receive for a very long time. The restaurant. I need to tell you about the restaurant because it is the part of the homecoming that I did not expect to be the most significant, and that turned out to be exactly that. My parents' Vietnamese restaurant in Baton Rouge. 35 years old. The thing my grandparents had built and my parents had continued, and that was, in the specific accounting of a family that had come from nothing, one of the most concrete forms of the life they had rebuilt. My father asked me, 2 weeks into the homecoming, if I wanted to come to the restaurant. Not as a customer. As family. I said yes. We went on a Saturday morning before the lunch service began. The kitchen was preparing. The staff, some of whom had been there for 15 years, were setting up for the day. My father walked me through the kitchen. He showed me things I had not known as a child. The specific sourcing of the ingredients that made the food what it was. The preparation techniques that had come from my grandmother and that had been maintained with the specific, disciplined consistency of people who understand that what makes a thing good is the refusal to compromise the making of it. He was proud of it. Genuinely, unself-consciously proud. I watched him be proud of it and I felt something I had not expected. I felt proud of it too. Not because the restaurant was mine, it was his and my mother's and in some sense my grandparents'. But because it was the same thing I had been doing for 12 years in a completely different context. Building something real. With discipline and consistency and the refusal to compromise the making of it. We were not as different as the 12 years had made us feel. We had been doing the same thing in different languages. I told him this. He looked at me for a long time when I said it. Then he said, "Your grandfather used to say that resilience does not have a single shape. It just has to be real." I said, "What shape did he say it was for him?" My father said, "The boat. The ocean. The first year in Louisiana. Building from nothing." "And for you?" I said. He looked around the kitchen. This, he said. I looked around the kitchen. And for me, I said, the army. He was quiet. Then he said, yes. For you, the army. He said it simply. Without performance. Without the complicated freight of 12 years of disagreement. Just, yes. For you, the army. I will carry that sentence for the rest of my life. I am 30 years old. I am living in Baton Rouge. Not permanently, I have not yet determined what permanent looks like. I am working with a veteran services organization, doing advocacy work for veterans' benefits and transition assistance. It is the right work for this moment, and I do not know yet what comes after this moment. My father and I have coffee on Tuesday mornings. Every Tuesday. At the restaurant, before service begins. We sit at the table by the window that overlooks the street and we drink coffee and we talk. Sometimes about significant things. Sometimes about nothing in particular. We are building the adult version of knowing each other. It is slow. It is the best thing that has happened in a very long time. My mother told me last month that she had found the box. I said I knew about the box. She said, I found something else. What? I said. She said, under the letters. At the bottom of the box. She handed me something. It was a photograph. Me. At 18. In the photograph I am leaving for basic training. My mother had taken it the morning I left. I remembered her taking it, the specific moment of it, the way I had turned back when she called my name and she had captured the turn. My father had been holding the photograph under the letters. He had kept the photograph under the letters for 12 years. I held the photograph for a long time. Then I put it back in the box. Where it belonged. Before you go, I want to tell you something that I want you to carry. The people who tell you not to come back, the ones who say it from fear, from love, from the specific, consuming desire to protect you from the thing they are most afraid of, those people are not your enemies. They are people who love you in a way that is not yet large enough to hold who you are. That is not a permanent condition. Love can grow. 12 years is a long time. And 12 years of letters in a box in a study, 12 years of reading a Bronze Star citation many times in the dark, 12 years of reading the words of a daughter you told not to come back, that is love growing in the only way available to it at the time. It is not nothing. It is, in fact, everything that love can do when it does not yet have the words. Come home. Whatever that means for you. Whatever door you have been standing outside of. Knock. The person on the other side may need 4 hours. They may need 4 years. Wait. Some doors are worth the waiting. Drop the word green in the comments if this story reached something real in you. Green for the door. Green for the color of the thing I had been standing outside of for 12 years and finally knocked on. And if you are new here, subscribe. Every single day I share a new story about family, about service, about the doors we walk away from and the ones we finally walk back to. I will see you in the next one. Kayla's Dark Truth.